Well, obviously, it's not just the Hamas position. It's basically the position of the entire Palestinian people here in Gaza. The 2 million residents of the enclave share some conflicted feelings of both an anxiety and hope, for example. They all hope for a ceasefire agreement because, obviously, Gaza continues to be devastated by this ongoing escalation. Residential buildings are targeted all the time. The infrastructure is basically collapsed. The healthcare system has become non-existent, especially with the continuous closure of the crossing borders, Karim, Abu Salim, Beit Hanun, and Rafah. They need a ceasefire desperately now. On the other hand, however, the resistance factions, and especially Hamas, continue to say that any agreement must include Jerusalem. That has always been the point. That has always been the reason this confrontation here erupted 10 days ago. So based on what spokespersons for the Hamas movement, as well as other factions like Islamic Jihad, keep telling us, unless an agreement that includes Jerusalem, the cancellation of the eviction plan in Sheikh Jarrah, a promise from the Israeli authorities to stop their crackdown on worshippers in Al-Aqsa, then no ceasefire agreement can be reached. The aggression both in Jerusalem and Gaza must simultaneously stop before any agreement can be reached between Hamas and the Israeli side. Today, Moussa Abu Marzouk, in an interview with the Lebanese television, said that they are expecting a ceasefire agreement to be reached soon, within 1 day or two. Basically, everybody here is anticipating that the ceasefire agreement or the truce will be reached on Friday. But basically, both parties, I think, need a victory story. Like Fatih said, it's the Israeli side needs a victory story. But basically, I can tell you that even the Palestinian factions here in Gaza need the same story, not just for the public, but because once again, this whole thing started because of Jerusalem, which is mainly the core of the Palestinian issue, the core of the Palestinian cause, and the main reason for this whole conflict between Palestine and Israel. So if the Palestinian factions were to agree to a ceasefire that does not include Jerusalem, then there will not be much of a victory story for them, and they would think that the sacrifices they made here, the lives that had been lost during the past 10 days, will go for nothing. And that's perhaps why it's taking too long. Fawzi Barhoum yesterday, a spokesman for Hamas, also confirmed to us that the talks are still continuing, that there are hopes of a ceasefire agreement, but he also stressed that none of the terms that we were hearing have changed. Jerusalem must be included in any deal between Israel and the Palestinian factions, and the Qataris, the Egyptian side, the United Nations, all diplomatic efforts are completely aware of this. And while the talk of a ceasefire agreement continues here, both parties continue to exchange fire. Israel intensifies its air raids as we speak on Deir al-Balah, in Rafah, in Ash-Shabura. They just targeted a residential house, which is basically Ash-Shabura, the largest refugee camp in Rafah. Deir al-Balah has been experiencing a very heavy bombardment during the past 2 hours. Saraya al-Quds, which is basically the armed wing of Islamic Jihad, as well as Al-Qassam, the armed wing of Hamas, continued to fire rockets in response to the Israeli targeting of civilians here, of civilian buildings. A family was killed in a massacre in Deir al-Balah earlier today. A man who was actually disabled, his pregnant wife and their daughter. So obviously things are not de-escalating right now as we speak, but there are hopes that they will maybe tomorrow or the day after. Everybody is expecting this to happen on Friday afternoon, and that's what Abu Marzouk did not actually deny.